Two candidates are in the running for the Democratic nomination in Utah's 1st Congressional District. One of them is Darren Parry. He joins us now to discuss why he's running for Congress and why he thinks he's the best candidate for the job. Darren, welcome to Inside Utah Politics. Thanks for being here.
Glenn, thanks for having me.
You bet. Let's get right into your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have done throughout life.
Well, thank you. I was born and raised in the 1st District in Syracuse. I'm a local kid. I heard somebody the other day say that they were a 5th generation Utahn. Well, I'm probably a 50 generation Utahn. My background is with the Shoshone Nation. I've been fortunate over the last few years to serve as the chairman of the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation. And that's significant because it's given me access to local and state officials and federal officials where I've had to navigate those waters that sometimes Native American communities and marginalized communities have to negotiate. So went to Weber State College, graduated from there, raised my family in the 1st District, and just a proud resident of Cache Valley today.
Talk about your qualifications. What do you believe it is that qualifies you for this position in Congress?
Well, a couple of things. One is that I have grown up in the district. I understand from the north to the south and east to the west. I understand rural communities and what are important to them. Also, as a tribal leader, I have great insight as to how the federal government and the state government work. And I've worked closely with all of those officials to make it better for Native American communities throughout this country. So that leadership, my bridge building, being able to bring people together to make a difference for the common good of everyone, I believe are my strengths.
I often hear from members of Congress, not necessarily just from Utah's congressional district, but we see it across the board. There's a lot of frustration of being able to get there and get things done. So what is it that interests you in taking what you have on the table to Washington, D.C. to represent Utah's 1st Congressional District?
Well, you're right. As a country, we seem as divided as ever. And so what I've seen is the political partisanship that exists today. And that's a world I'm not familiar with. And so my background in sitting down with officials that absolutely have different opinions than my Native American communities have had over the years, and being able to negotiate a settlement that's fair for everyone is one of the strengths and what I will take to Washington, D.C. It's not okay anymore to have the divisiveness that we have today. I'm running to bring people together, to build bridges of understanding. It's okay to have disagreements, but it's not okay to not sit down, understand those disagreements, and work together for the common good of the people. And that's what I really want to take back to Washington, D.C.
What do you see as the most pressing issues for the people of Utah's 1st Congressional District over the next 2 years?
Well, a couple of months ago, I would have said climate change and the protection of our public lands, which are still vitally important. But as the pandemic has taught us, what we need to do to make sure that the most vulnerable of our people are protected would be a pressing issue going forward for me. I was able to participate a couple of weeks ago to provide the Navajo Nation, my Navajo brothers and sisters, with just basic living supplies. And so you look at situations like that, you look at our rural communities, you look at the middle class and the class of people that are on the front lines working every day in the service industries, how their lives have been impacted by loss of jobs, no health care. That's a problem, and it's a problem that I want to participate in and solve.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. You mentioned underserved communities, underrepresented communities, and Navajo Nation, one of the hardest hit areas, in fact, per capita, the hardest hit area in the nation as far as the coronavirus is considered. What's your analysis and assessment of how the federal government has responded to meet the need down on Navajo Nation?
Very, very, very slow. And look, Native American communities all across this country have lived a second class citizenship life. And so the CARES Act, which a lot of people have received money from, a lot of large businesses received money from, and some small business. Well, up until a week ago, Native communities that were promised $8 billion in funding didn't realize any of that until just really recently. And now, as a tribal leader, we've got this little pot of money, and it comes with a lot of strings attached on how we can spend that, and a deadline to how we can spend that. The Navajo Nation, there are many in the state of Utah that don't have running water or electricity. And in the year 2020, that's not acceptable by any means for anybody. And so the government's been slow, and we really need to do a better job of taking care of those communities that are marginalized.
Darren, you mentioned all the people who've lost their jobs in this situation, hundreds of thousands in Utah, millions across the country. How do you balance the economy and public safety? What are your views on that?
That's a good question, and what I would defer to always for me, look, I'm not that smart of a guy. I think I do okay, but the science matters here. And so to me, we listen to the people that know. And the scientists and the healthcare providers, they're the ones that know. My wife participates, she's a nurse and of 34 years, and she's participating in a research study to help with the COVID-19 crisis on best practices that we may be able to find a cure on. So it's become crystal clear to me that we need to do a better job there.
So let's break it down a little closer to home here in Utah. Are you in approval of the way we are now moving forward and starting to reopen the economy again?
I am, with caution. So everywhere I go, I try to wear a face mask. I try to keep the social distancing. I believe when we hear those reports from Governor Herbert and his health care people that if they're comfortable with that, then I should be. But even then, I have an individual responsibility to myself and those I come in contact with to make sure that I'm doing everything I can within those guidelines to protect myself and my neighbors.
Okay. You mentioned public lands earlier. I want to get more on that because that has been a big issue in Utah's 1st Congressional District. Take about 30 seconds and assess what we've seen from Representative Bishop when it comes to public lands.
Well, I like Rob Bishop, and if you look at his land policies over the first few terms, they were completely different than what they were the last few terms, especially under Obama. And so my plan is threefold. One, it needs to be an open and honest process. It's a process that we need to bring all stakeholders together to make an informed decision. And then the federal land managers who manage those precious resources should work closely with state and local officials to make sure that the plan lines up to what we want to accomplish with our federal guidelines.
Okay, real quick.
And that would be my policy.
We're going to have to end, but real fast, what is your pitch to Democratic primary voters?
This election is not about just bullet points and issues. It's about leadership, and leadership that can bring people to the table that have difference of opinions and can work together with the other party to make a difference.
Okay, we're going to have to end it on that note. Thank you for your time. Appreciate having you with us.
Thank you, Glenn.